Hey friends, welcome to Midweek. Thanks for joining with me tonight. And I know if you're like me, you're outside and you're just thinking, not another snowy day. In fact, I can't even remember when it wasn't snowing. It seems like it's been so long, or much less when the sun is actually shining and it just seems to be a great day. And I just know if you're like me, this environment, this atmosphere, this darkness can just kind of overwhelm you to where you start to feel depressed, maybe a little anxious, and you just want to have connection. And so I get it. And if you're feeling a little blue today, I just want you to know, I see you. I get it because I get there too sometimes. But more importantly, God sees you. And if you need a little bit of a reminder of how much he cares about you, he gave his one and only son to die on a cross so that you could be free. The sin that you and I have put him up there so that you and I could be free. That's how much God loves us. And I know that seems like a churchy Sunday school answer, but man, when you really take time to think about that, when you sit there and just dissect all of those words and all of that understanding of just knowing that God loves me that much, it brightens up your day a little bit. So I hope that can be a little bit of an encouragement for you. And as we dive into our topic tonight, we've been in this series on relationships starting in the first week of February, and we've just been kind of trucking through there, mostly talking about marriage and that relationship between you and your spouse. But tonight I want to talk about that relationship with a little bit more of a specific purpose. And the two topics I want to talk about is selfishness and selflessness. Now let me ask you a question. How many of you, and you can raise your hand because I'm not going to see you anyway, but how many of you have ever had a relationship become complicated because of your selfishness? I know, right? I have too. And maybe you've been in a relationship where you just figured you can't do this anymore because of a result of their selfishness. Almost every couple that I've ever counseled in ministry alone, much less teenagers, friendships, whatever it may be, always stems back to that area of selfishness. Well, he's not doing his part. I want it done this way. I want it done that way. I wish that she would meet this need. I wish that he would see me this way. And it's always that conflict that goes back and forth. Whatever that blank may be for you, I guarantee you found yourself in this world of selfishness. Right? But let me ask you this question as well. Have you ever been involved in a relationship where you've seen someone act selflessly, with selflessness, where they were always giving of themselves, always putting others first, always trying to do their best to put a smile on their face, regardless of the emotion behind them, regardless of how their day went, their week went, regardless of anything? Their circumstances didn't define the moment, but they always went above and beyond. And my guess is when you think about that relationship, it brings a smile to your face, right? Because that person has left an impact on your heart, deeply embedded into your soul, because you start thinking, man, I wish that I could be that way. And I'll be honest, this is a really hard topic for me to talk about because I fall more in the selfishness category. And it's not that I try to be. I don't expect things to be my way. I get that. I don't expect everything to be done according to what I say. And I get that, excuse me. But I fall into that category sometimes because I'll come home from work and there's times I just want to sit down and do nothing. I mean, you think so hard, you work so hard, you come home. The last thing you want to do is cook a meal for your family, help your wife with the dishes, whatever it may be. The last thing you want to do is be selfless. And I just want some me time. Have you ever said that before? In fact, I probably say that to my wife on a daily basis. And I feel so bad for having to admit that out loud, but I think admitting it starts to open your eyes to the problem that's behind it. And I've realized over the course of my life, there are moments in relationships where it could have been a disaster because of my selfishness. Now, I'm thankful for the grace of God, because without his grace and without his mercy, these relationships would probably be long gone. And I'm thankful for the mercy and the grace of the friendships and my wife even having to deal with this sometimes. And so their forgiveness is key on moving on, right? But I also had moments in my life where I have been selfless and I see the impact that it had on another person, or more so, where someone else was selfless with me. Whether they saw a need in me that they said, hey, I want to meet that. I see you're struggling and I'm going to meet that need wherever you are, whatever I can do. This is what I can do. I want to help you. And to see how that takes the relationship to a different level because of someone being selfless and looking at me with the love that they had, with the grace that they had, seeing the pain deep within me and saying, hey, I don't know what's really going on, but I'm going to pray for you. And, or more or less, I've had people give up their time with their family because they knew of a situation that I'm dealing with and they just wanted to come over and talk. And we'll sit there and we'll talk and tears will be shed and they'll give me the biggest hug that they've ever given anybody. I may say, hey, what did I keep you from tonight? And they're like, oh, my daughter was playing a volleyball game or a basketball game, or my wife and I had this plan, but hey, this was so much more important. And you feel guilty for a moment, but then it's that friendship that just builds greater than that because of an act of selflessness from somebody else. Jesus talks about this all the time in the Bible. In fact, in Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, he basically says, whoever wants to be my disciple must take up their cross, deny themselves, and follow me. I mean, do you hear that? Deny yourself. Give up your selfishness. I mean, Jesus talks about this all the time. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. He's telling this to his disciples. That's you and me. Anyone who says that they want to follow Jesus and have made that commitment, that's what we do. We have to deny ourselves. But man, that is so hard. That is so hard, especially in the relationship you have with your spouse, because we have needs that need to be met. I come home, I'm tired. I see the dirty laundry sitting there, and I could easily be selfless and take a few minutes of my day to help simply load the washer, or to fold some clothes, or to see a dish or dishes filled the sink. I could easily walk over there and try to do some of those before my wife even gets home. And there are days that I do that. I hope that she would admit to that. But more days than not, I simply just say, oh, it can wait till tomorrow. We'll do it together tomorrow. And then I leave that burden for her to stress about. And I just wonder, what would my marriage look like if every day I denied myself? And I said, you know what? I just want to make her happy. I want to make my friends happy. I want to make the people around me know who Jesus is. And so today, I'm going to just be as selfless as I can. I'm going to offer my time in many ways that I possibly can. Another thing that Jesus says just a few chapters later, and he's talking to his disciples because they're sitting here arguing about who is the greatest amongst them, which is a pretty high seat to try to get to, right? I mean, you're walking with Jesus. He's the Son of God. He is the creator of all things. And yet you're one of his closest friends. You're his disciples. You're walking with them. And so they start arguing amongst themselves. And they start saying, who is the greatest amongst us? I mean, there's Jesus. Obviously, we can't be at his level, but he's got to have a favorite. And so they start discussing who's going to sit at his right hand, who's going to sit at his left. And they just have this big argument. And Jesus says, let me tell you this. Let me tell you what it means to be great. And he basically talks about how if you want to be elevated to the top, you got to do it through humility. It's through humility that you'll be great. So if you want to follow me, if you want to be the greatest amongst me, you got to learn to be a servant. You've got to learn to serve with your heart. What if we looked in our marriage with how we can serve our spouse? Because I guarantee you, not one marriage have I found where both people are working for the other person, caring about what she thinks and what he thinks, and working so hard to try to please one another that they ever need help. Not one couple have I met that way, where they said, well, the reason I want to divorce her is because she's doing everything she can to please me. The reason I want to divorce him is because he goes out of his way to try to make sure my needs are always met. Right? That just seems crazy when you put it into language like that. It just seems crazy when you paint that picture. But what would it look like in your marriage, in your life, if you started following that direction? If you started looking at this and saying, you know what? I just want to serve you. I want to serve people. Because those type of people are the ones that make an imprint on our heart. Man, look at the servant of that guy. Look at his heart for people. Look at what he just does. Like, he had all these other things he could be doing, but yet he's right here serving me, serving you. And people like that make a big difference. But I want to close with this passage. And it comes from Philippians chapter 2, starting with verse 1 through 4. It says, and this is Paul writing. Remember, Paul is a big apostle of Jesus. And it says this: if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ. Have you been encouraged by having a relationship with Jesus? He's saying, if you have any comfort from his love, have you been comforted by God's love? If any fellowship with the saints, if any tenderness or compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and in purpose. So what Paul is saying, he goes, if you've experienced Christ this way, if you've been comforted by his love, if you've been blessed by his grace, if you've been changed, if your life has been impacted by Jesus himself or his bride, the church, if any of this has impacted you at all, then here's how he closes. He says, then do me a favor, verse 4. verse 3. Then do me a favor. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourself. Man, what a challenge. Do you see what Paul is saying? He's saying if God has blessed you in any way possible, if the church has been an encouragement for any of you, which if I were to ask you to show your hands who's been impacted by a relationship with Jesus Christ, every one of you would probably raise your hand. If I'd ask you who's been impacted by the grace of God through his bride, the church, who has been encouraged by the church, hopefully most of you would raise your hand, if not all of you would raise your hand. And he says, if you've been impacted in any way by any of those, he says, then do me a favor. Go out there and love people. Go out there and serve people. Do nothing out of selfish ambition. Do nothing with the idea of what's in it for me. What am I going to get out of it? But do everything for love for people. Do everything in love for people. So let me ask you this. In what way this week can you serve somebody else? In fact, ask yourself that for multiple people. The first one's your spouse. In what way can I serve my spouse this week? You may have to have that conversation. You may have to ask him or her and say, listen, I want to do the best I can to serve you and let you know that I love you. And so this week, I just want to help you out wherever I can. Is there something that I could be doing that you would really appreciate, that I can help get caught up with? And then do it. And then go on and ask yourself that for other people. What can I do to my circle of friends where I can just show them that I love them, where I could be selfless, where I could just serve them, consider them better than myself for a moment? What are some ways I can do that? And then ask yourself for maybe somebody that you're not so into, someone who you might even consider an enemy, and say, okay, God, this is going to be one where I'm going to need your help. But how can I serve those who oppose me? How can I serve those who are against me? And just watch how God unfolds all of this stuff. Because he says it himself, those who humble themselves will be exalted. And I love that. So friends, I hope this brings you a little encouragement. I hope that we can identify the selfishness versus the selflessness in our own lives, and that we can work together in making this whole thing work. And so God bless you guys. I hope that you find yourselves doing well. I hope that you find encouragement here, and just know that we're always here to try to help talk and share life with you. And so if there are areas of your life where you just need somebody to walk alongside you, don't ever hesitate to reach out. We've got several people on staff here. We've got a bunch of elders who care a lot about you, and we just want to be able to take the time to walk through life. So don't ever think that you're burdening us by coming and talk, because I promise I've got a lot of burden that I could lay on you too. And so I just appreciate all of you guys, and I hope that you understand that life is not meant to be alone. And so let's learn to love one another the way Jesus taught us, because he is ultimately the best relationship expert. God bless. We'll see you guys later. Have a good week.